It's the Soft Issues podcast with Wei, Matt, Lee and Ev. This week we're talking about custom geometry, who needs it and why.
Yeah, let's talk about custom geometry. Who wants to go first?
Well, who needs it? How do you know if you need it?
Yeah. Well, I guess it depends on kind of your different perspectives. I guess, Ev, you have a different perspective from like a frame kind of builder side of things.
Different perspective from most people.
Yeah. And even between kind of bike fitters, we've got 3 bike fitters here. Mm-hmm. So, there's going to be different kind of thoughts on that. But yeah, maybe I'll kick things off with some thoughts on custom geometry and just setting some of the scene, I guess. Like, I think custom geometry is kind of faded out a little bit. Maybe there's like less, desire for custom geometry at the moment. I don't know, I get this kind of vibe that like people aren't so concerned about kind of custom geometry as maybe they were. Maybe like,
shall I be the devil's advocate? You don't need it anymore. Ever since the giant TCR, which they kind of designed in order to be able to sell one size bike to more people, right? And then everybody started copying that sloping top tube compact geometry, and all of a sudden you didn't need to tailor your bike size to you. You just changed your stem or raised your saddle in the seat post. So
yeah, absolutely. I think.
What do you have to say about that?
Well, I don't know. There's always a time and a place, but I feel like almost like with like kind of trends as well, and certain flavors, flavor of the month, flavor of the year, and so on. There's always a better time for things, or like a hiatus.
I see it as like an essential thing for certain people. So I don't see it as something that like someone looks for. It's usually as a result of like a bike fit, dependent on the way they interact with a bike. So for example, myself, I have really long legs. So I have a 94 inseam and I'm 187 tall. So that's very long legs. So obviously my saddle height on a normal 58 bike has to be very high. So we can see my bike just over there. It's got a lot of exposed seat posts. It also means that obviously we're following the seat tube back towards the angle. So the setback is going further and further back. And then my shorter torso can't reach the bars. So generally speaking, I don't fit that bike very well if you look at it, because I have to have the seat round forward. Ideally, I'd like a custom bike because of those reasons, if that makes sense. I find that a lot with different people.
So I have the opposite problem to you. I can't get bikes that are long enough. So I've got super short legs, ridiculously long torso. So what have I got? Like a 130 stem with 100mm reach bars on a top tube reach that is about 395.
395.
And I'm still cramped. But
when you get out of the saddle, what happens then?
I just don't.
Okay.
Because the bike doesn't handle very well.
That sounds like a really tough attitude. It's like, do you ever get out of the saddle? I never get out of the saddle.
Always ride on flat ground.
Yeah.
But this is the thing. So two very different ends of the spectrum. 2 candidates for custom geometry.
Okay, I've got another one. So I've got the same length tibia as femur. As by my expert tape measure measurements, which means that with all these, don't get me started on crank length, but if my crank length isn't suitably short, it doesn't. I can't put any power out. It's ridiculous. Like anything more than 170, I just can't put any power down. And and because of the long tibia. When I get out of the saddle, I'm way over the front of the bike, so far over the front of the bike that if I don't have an incredibly long and low position, I feel like I'm going to just fall over the front of the bike. So kind of that's how my road position ended up being like really slouched. It's like it's a compromise because when you're sat, obviously you're quite long, but you find it.
So in a way, a custom bike would be quite nice for you because obviously that would be made for your particular.
Yeah, I mean, I would literally go for like a medium, like a 54 centimeter frame in everything else except the top tube, where I just add another centimeter on it. or even more, just to get a little bit more length. Or maybe just would be better to like mess with the seat tube angle or something to get my position in.
Does anyone have a custom bike here?
Yeah, so that bike over there is a custom bike.
It looks very
Probably the
custom,
only one
doesn't
that
it?
fits.
Yeah. So yeah, and it was kind of built with certain things in mind as well. So I guess we've been talking about like kind of custom bikes in terms of fit and how it kind of relates to your body and your body proportions, but also about like kind of how it rides. And so I guess that's where some of the magic kind of happens in a custom bike, in that it fits you really, really well, but also can ride or create a certain kind of ride feel or kind of help you towards a certain kind of riding goal that maybe you wouldn't be able to get from like a non-custom bike, or it just kind of does everything better.
Well, I mean, the idea is that you can get your tube lengths and your contact points where you need them to be, and you can just adjust the angles a little bit so that like your head angle is not too slack or not too steep or whatever, so that the bike rides the same as it's like supposed to do. But if you tried a off the shelf one, you wouldn't be able to get your contact points in the right place without
feel intuitive on corners.
Yeah, exactly.
Because obviously the stem would be where it's designed to be.
Yeah,
Near the top tube.
But then, like, kind of, how did we all come to this point where we felt like you knew that you needed a custom bike? Like, Lee, how did you figure out that because of those kind of
I guess as a result
proportions?
of a bike fit. So I had a bike fit, and where I felt best was that. And then if we look aesthetically at a bike and we see that a saddle's been rammed forward with an inline post with not particularly slack seat angle, seat tube angle, and I've got a 90mm stem, it's not the ideal fit, just from that really. But then if you move, I'd actually prefer to be a few centimetres forward as well. It just feels a lot better. I'm on top of the pedal stroke. I feel like, a lot more relaxed in the arms, and it's a result of just where I feel better in space.
But you've done a lot of riding on that bike.
Yeah.
It's amazing how the body gets used to stuff.
Yeah.
You just give it time, train yourself into a certain position.
Yeah.
It might not be ideal, but and you'll eventually get injured.
And cry.
Well, so there is a blurry line then between like kind of what is ideal is ideal. I don't know. I guess ideal can be a moving target as well, by like kind of what you're suggesting. Like you can train your body into a position, so you can adapt your body to a position. So do you kind of adapt around the bike, or do you need the bike to kind of adapt around you, or kind of put yourself in that
probably
position?
bit both, isn't it? Kind of like meet in the middle. There's a certain level of, okay, there are certain types of bike, like race bikes, right? Yeah. They're meant to be ridden in a certain position, in a quite an aggressive position. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't ever ride them because it's aggressive. But if you are going to ride that bike, it's probably advisable to ride it quite a bit, right? So that your body gets used to it and you strengthen up muscle groups in the right areas.
And also very fast as well. Because
As
otherwise
fast
you're
as
just
you
going to have
possibly
really
can.
sore hands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's another thing about weight distribution and speed. Most people ride the turbo at some point, right?
Yeah,
especially with Swift and stuff. And you've got this bike that's super comfortable and you've been riding it for years and it's great. And then you sit on the turbo and suddenly you're like, oh my God, this is horrible. Why would I ever, I have to change everything.
Yeah.
And then you do, when you go back out on the road, you go, no, it was fine. Because when you're sat on the turbo, you don't have a massive fan in front of you, like pushing you back into the saddle.
Yeah.
You're doing like maybe like 30, 35K or faster. Imagine the wind resistance, like it's just putting you off balance. Where you get on the turbo and suddenly you put so much weight on your hands, you feel like you're falling forward. And you have to wedge up the front wheel, and then your position is once again not ideal, because you're riding like you're riding on the flat, but your saddle's in your balls.
Nobody wants that.
Nobody wants that.
So I guess we're talking about specificity. So we're getting on to kind of how bikes can perform in a specific kind of way. Like, but going back to like the giant TCR, then like is a kind of stock geometry specific enough? Like it sounds like an oxymoron, doesn't it? But like, is it good enough so that people can do what they want to do?
I think it would be better if you had companies like Canyon and like Trek and Specialized, where you can, when you order the bike, and especially Ribble, and you can choose things. But unfortunately, it's obviously all made in Taiwan. They're packaged and they just come as they are. But it's incredibly wasteful because obviously you have to change out the bars, the stems, the saddles, the cranks. So it's a shame that we can't have a little bit more control over that. And as a buyer, you have a bike fit, you know exactly what you need. It'd be amazing if you could just do that via a company that you pay $3 or $4 grand for a bike, which is what most people are spending anyway. And it seems fair.
It's economies of scale, isn't it? It's kind of like how much I need 1,000 chain sets. Well, if I buy all the same size, I get them for a song. If I have to buy, and how many do I buy if I'm going to buy like all these different crank lengths, all these different chain link sizes, and all these things? And so it always comes down to cost, doesn't it?
But maybe we should make also the distinction between, say, a custom geometry bike and then a bike that is customized. So so the Canyon example was just talking about stock geometry. So you get 6 different sizes of bike, but you kit the bike out in different components so that you make the bike fit a certain person. Whereas custom geometry is kind of starting from nothing, building from the ground up, deciding what kind of shape bike would suit your body, and welding tubes to make that kind of shape, and with a kind of certain vision in mind for kind of what the job of that kind of bike would be.
It'd be good to have more information out there about, and I think a lot of custom builders don't, probably because they're so busy welding that they don't really have time to sit and do. You can do geocharts, and you can say, okay, this is this size and this size and this size, and this is gonna have this size length top tube or whatever, or these angles, and then when you're customizing it to somebody, it's like, because you're talking about bike fit versus geometry, right? So they're intertwined, but they're two very different things. Like geometry is how the bike is going to ride, and bike fit is how how comfortable it's going to be for you, right? How you're going to be able to get power out and stuff. But with custom geo, you've got things like wheelbase that makes a massive difference. Head angle, seat tube angle makes a massive difference. Front center, setback, which as opposed to saddle setback, bottom bracket setback, and like how the angle of the seat tube and stuff. Those things can make a massive difference. And when you've got stock frames like the TCR or any basically modern compact geometry now, there can still only be so many sizes. So there's always going to be these people that are just in between the small /M, medium/large. Like, well, how many are they going to do? How cost effective is it to do 7 or 8 different frame sizes instead of 5? It's not very cost effective for companies doing massive things. That's where custom comes in, really. But it would be good to have more information out there about what geometry really does, and why it works a certain way. I know it's a bit.
I don't know. I'm going to play devil's advocate as well.
Here we go.
And like maybe ignorance is bliss. Like, is there too much information? Like, maybe people don't even want to know about geometry. They just want to get on a bike and ride it. I mean, that's where the marketing people come in, isn't it? The thing is, the marketing people want to sell the object, whatever it is. So what they do is they make up a bunch of stuff, and then they just write it down, and then they tell everyone. But they don't know what it is they're talking about unless they are, experts in the field that went into marketing, which that doesn't happen, does it, really?
But if there's some science behind it, problem is it's all been done before. How do you convince people that when I say there's a science behind these geometries, why am I telling the truth and the Canyon are lying? Or whatever brand. Pick a brand.
If anything, with custom, we're trying to take someone away from spending God knows how much on a Canyon that's not going to fit in the first place. I spend most of my job doing that because there's people that want to spend a lot of money, but they've been so heavily marketed by brands like Specialized and Canyon that they want that, but that won't fit, or that's given them pain. So as a result of making it better, they can spend the same money and have a custom bike, but it's not as luxurious or exotic. And because they don't know certain brands that I won't mention, but because they don't know those, it's not as exciting. Even though they're going to have more fun on the bike and they're going to be a lot more comfortable and it's going to feel better, they're generally not interested.
Yeah, so ultimately it's a perception of value, isn't it? What do you value? Do you value the object, the aesthetic, the integrated nature of modern superbikes or whatever? Or do you value your time on the bike, your riding experience?
Sure.
You can have a 12 grand SL7, you can ride it for half an hour and you can have a bad back, you'd be out for the rest of the week. Whereas, a bike that fits you well doesn't necessarily have to be a custom geometry. A customized bike, which has contact points that are kind of appropriate for your mobility, your flexibility, your riding style, all this kind of stuff, will give you a far better experience. Yes, it might not be the thing that you covet, that you can sit at the cab and go, oh yeah, that's a nice bike, and then can't see a cable. Bang it.
I'll tell you who doesn't love the integrated nature of modern bikes. Mechanics.
Yeah. Well, there's a whole other conversation. But it's like that perception of value, isn't it? Of like, what do you value most? The experience of riding your bike, or just the kind of the kudos of having a certain bike that looks a certain way in a certain
Why does everyone hate cables? What's the deal?
I love cables. I can fix
I love
cables.
cable. Yeah, I'm rim brakes and cable gears until I die.
Again, marketing. It's just pushed.
Yeah. I mean, there are pluses and minuses in all these things.
You dug yourself into that one, didn't you?
Let me just Google that. What are the benefits of disc brakes on road bikes? Let me think. You look like the pros do now because they've all been forced into riding disc brakes.
Nice.
And then now when they crash, it's much faster because they reckon their brakes are so much better that they do it at the last minute.
Just you wait till electronic braking comes in.
No. Because you know what? The last thing fly by wire to fail was that submarine. Right?
So, you had to bring that one in, didn't you?
We can cut that out. It's not. No, God, no. No, please don't do that. Because imagine, it's fine if your Di2 battery runs out on a ride in Hertfordshire, but you're going down a 15% decline.
All in the name of progress. Though.
All in the name of progress. Well, they'll just have to go. It's like the infrastructure is another bloody conversation. You either don't do silly things like fly-by-wire brakes, or you build more hedges at the bottom of climbs,
Lots more.
just to catch the Sunday cyclists.
Has anyone ever had a client? Sorry, just the bike fitters here, I guess. Might be as well. But I'm just wondering, has anyone had a client that's been really obvious custom kind of candidate? Like you've had a particularly interesting fit and you've been like, yeah.
They're like buses, aren't they, really? You don't get one for ages and then three come along at once.
Yeah, okay.
There's always kind of, you start to see things and you're like, oh yeah, if you just had a bike that was, a bit taller and a bit shorter, or a bit longer and a bit lower, and you could run the stem right in the middle of the spacer stack. You could have adjustment both ways. We could get all this kind of stuff starts going through your head, and it's it's optimal versus practical, isn't it? It's yes, you would be a great candidate for a custom geometry, and a really nice custom steel or titanium bike would be amazing for you. But let's face the reality. you want to do a few laps before work on the morning, go out for a long ride to the calf with your mates on a weekend, and that's pretty much it, and yeah, so it's kind of like that is a tough sell to someone who is kind of all they want is a Canyon Ultimate.
They want it because their friends have got it.
They want it because their mates have got it,
Yeah.
and because they see people on TV riding in the Pro Tour.
Slammed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like what is the main objective of your bike fit? Slam my step. Well,
Tough.
all right.
You're having back problems.
Yeah,
Shut up.
let's revisit the optimal versus practical equation. It's
So you never had someone that you've kind of essentially not sold a custom bike to, but you've never had someone who has a particular, maybe like something wrong with them,
you can always recommend.
Yeah.
Never really kind of sell to. We're here to give knowledge, information, so that our clients can make the best decisions possible for them. But yeah, it's kind of sometimes you do get a customer who is a A1 candidate for a custom geo. Whether they take that advice or not is kind of down to them. But you can just show them the way. And it's like, this is how good it can be. This is what is possible on XYZ bike of your choice. It's up to you. I'm not going to make the decision for you, but I can lay all the options on the table for you to make a better informed decision.
Sure.
And that's kind of the way I kind of think about it, really.
Wouldn't it be great if you could have a jig that you could ride, like outside? Like you can, but you can just you can just click and adjust everything and adjust the geometry and the fit and everything.
That would
you
be
can
cool.
ride it. That'd be amazing.
Tony Cork's got that one, hasn't he? Where it's electronic and it kind of goes up and down.
Yeah.
So we just need to find a really light version of that, and we can kind of
I
you'd
think
have
he
like
made
a
a
PlayStation
rideable
controller.
version at some point.
Really?
Yeah.
I saw a guy at Bespoke a few years back who made a mountain bike with the head angle was adjustable while you ride, and it had like one of those like old clockwork keys that you do in an arm blade, like something like that, and you could just dial it in. So you're climbing, and it's really steep, and then you come to a top of the hill, and you're just like slacken it out, and then just.
That's mental.
Yeah, but it also looked like it weighed about 30 tons.
But all of this, like we've been talking about, it kind of requires a certain kind of level of
Knowledge?
Yeah.
You mean flip chips aren't like,
knowledge
best
and
things that
experience
slice
in riding. Yeah, like if you don't know what a certain position feels like to ride versus another position to ride versus another position, or even like different bikes. We've all been around like kind of bikes for a long time and so on, but like the majority of people that come in to see us, like they haven't ridden like 5 different bikes in different positions, and how many bikes have you got in your garage?
Maybe they should.
yeah.
Maybe you should have lots of different bikes for them.
I mean,
but like you say, at the same time, the stuff like I was taking the piss out of flip chips and stuff like that because a lot of them are gimmicks. But at the same time, if there's something that you can change relatively quickly, or mostly mountain biking, but we don't do it so much in road bikes, but maybe we should. It's like if you had something where you could change your wheelbase, or you could change it. Canyon actually did that. They actually had a fork where they had 2 different trail options, right? Not something you stop at the cafe and like take your some people can't even get their wheel out, but you could actually make it steeper or slacker. Not that many people would ever do that. They would just leave it as it came out of the box and just ride it. But having that option was like that was interesting. I like the idea of being able to. For me, that would be fantastic. I'd love a bike where I can just change the angles just a little bit depending on my mood, or just to see what it feels like.
There are components you can get to kind of. I think Redshift do quite a few ones, don't they?
Well, they do
like
those suspension steps.
Yeah.
Well, the elastic.
But that must change. That that effectively does change quite a few things, because when you add suspension, you add like different angles, didn't you?
Well, as it goes through the travel, it steepens your head angle. If it's the stem one, they also do a saddle one. But there are it's like double-edged sword. Some of these expensive bikes, like the SL7, for example, they have either a one-piece bar and stem, or they have they'll have a stem with what's the bigger diameter now?
1.25.
1.25. So they have that, but it will come with a shim. But the shim is also a wedge.
Yeah.
So depending on how you can actually like change the angle, and you can also change if you do it the other way, so it's not a wedge, it'll just change your actual reach a little bit, a couple of mil or something.
But geometry changes. I think definitely probably harder for a lot of people to comprehend. Like I'd say the general rider hasn't really put that much thought into kind of geometry or like kind of how a bike should handle, or like kind of even that kind of like option of like should I put it in this flip chip position or the next?
Like what happens when I do that? Like the bike industry is famous for giving you options but not telling you what they do. Like, here's the instructions. Scan this code and read online. No one's going to do that.
But the most obvious example I can think of is like just dropper posts. Like, like that immediately, it's like super fast. It immediately changes like what you can do on a bike, how you descend on the mountain bike and so on. What they appearing on the pro road circuit and stuff like that.
Yeah, they should totally do those for road bikes. What a great idea. Where can we save weight so that we can make up for dropper posts?
When Matthew Moritz did that, I think it was a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
We were all like, everyone's going to start coming with dropper posts.
Yeah.
But they didn't, thankfully.
The timing and the manufacturer, lead times are quite long. So they're coming. I'm sure they're coming. In the next 6 months, I think you'll start to see it. But it was, I bet the people behind that they watched that wobble that he had and thought, oh, God.
Yeah.
As long as he doesn't crash, then everybody will want one of these now.
Yeah. Or you just be Tom Pidcock and just...
not need one.
Yeah.
But Tom Pidcock is what? 3 feet? Something. I mean, he's so low. His center of gravity is so low. You watched that? Was it Chris Froome? Like, who basically looks like a lollipop riding a bike compared to Tom. And Chris Froome's not a bad descender anymore. He used to be crap, but he improved like a ton. And he was like holding on, but like the center of gravity is like, well, that shows you straight off. How getting your center of gravity and your position on the bike is really important.
Well, it's physics, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, there's certain laws of the universe which all must
you try and balance a tennis racket on the palm of your hand. You know, it's pretty. You should have a tennis racket in here to actually show people that.
But like you zoom out further, you're talking about flip chips, dropper posts, like adjustable geometries. Like a lot of people that ride bikes aren't even aware of how they're positioned on a stock geometry. Yeah. So how do you know that you're going to need a cut, or you would be better served with a custom geometry? And that's where us, the industry, quote unquote, come in with this information. But the way the bike industry works, as we all know, we're cynical old gits who've been in it a long time. The bike industry is probably the only industry which does the best job of shooting itself in the foot consistently and catastrophically.
Which part of the foot?
Well, the whole of it. And then when they've done one, they go on to the next one. But it's like, how can, like you were saying earlier, how can we educate people to make better decisions without that extensive kind of, years and years of riding a bike? And that's kind of where I think we fall down a little bit.
You should be the first port of call.
Yeah,
like that's the thing. Like there was the glory days of the bike shop industry where they had jigs in there and a 16-year-old who didn't know what he was doing trying to fit somebody on a bike. But at least you got to sit on a bike and
you got to feel something.
You got to feel something.
Yeah,
just let me feel something.
I think we can't ignore that it is a luxury, though. Custom bike, buying custom bike is a luxury.
100%. 100%.
Well, okay, but let me put it another way. It's a luxury until you get one and you realize that you've been missing out on just the basic enjoyment or convenience of having a bike that fits you properly for however many years until you realize, how many years before I realized that I needed shorter cranks. And then I got them and I was like, well, I'm glad I spent that 400 quid. I'm poor, but I've got, I can ride my bike fast now.
It's that perception of value again, isn't
Exactly.
it? Where do you place the value?
Yeah.
It's like getting a custom-made suit.
Yeah.
You know, you're not going to turn up for your wedding in a suit from Asda, are you? You could.
I mean, I would.
I was thinking that.
What colours do they do?
Yeah, pay attention, Lee.
Yeah, but it's like,
take that back.
it'll probably fit all right, but it's not going to be tailored. And that's kind of
The process, which is a luxury, but also why shouldn't you have, like, if you're getting married, you're spending
bicycle.
to your bicycle. you're spending whatever money, you're spending however much money you're spending on a wedding or a bicycle or whatever. Like, the process of buying that thing
and
understanding what it is you're buying. Some people are geeks about whenever they're going to buy something. Like, I know that if I'm going to buy some headphones or whatever, or a new phone, my algorithm for the next 3 years is like, how about this phone? I'm like, no, I've got the phone now, but I did spend a lot of time watching videos and reading up on different stuff. So when it came to shelling out my cash, I got the right thing.
You're making a more informed decision.
Yeah, and a way more informed decision. And the people impulse buy bikes, knowing.
I think the process is one of the most beautiful things about custom bikes. I mean, I would send fit data from what we get on, obviously, the custom. It would go to a company, for example, in Italy or America. They would look over that geometry. They would look at the foot size. They would look at the weight of the person. They would look at what they want to do, their inseam, their height, all that kind of stuff. And they'd make up the carbon layout from how heavy they're going to be. They would obviously, all that characteristics of the geometry, they'd obviously take that in consideration, toe overlap, all that kind of thing with the correct crank. And then they would come back to me with the geometry. I would then send it off, have a look at it, re-look at the jig, remeasure everything, make sure everything's perfect, and then send it back to them with if it's okay or not okay. And then they send the design through that the person has designed themselves, or you've gave them help, inspiration, and then they come back with a paint draft, and then they okay that, and it's a wonderful thing, because then obviously you get it in the shop, and it's just something that person has made themselves, and hopefully it's
unique to them,
and something that will last forever, especially things like titanium. I've dealt with number 22 before, and in my opinion they're some of the best bikes out there because of the workmanship is just insane, and they're really good at what they do. If I had the money, I would get a custom bike, but I don't yet.
Everyone that works in the bike industry is like, well, why can't I have all this nice stuff? Why haven't I got all this money?
So that's going back to full circle, that thing, isn't it? Who needs a custom bike? Optimal versus practical. How close can you get to optimal with the constraints of life, budget, like cost of living, all this kind of stuff. So it is a luxury, but again, it's knowledge and information of guiding people to make a decision for themselves as to what is going to be best for them, their needs, their budget, all that kind of stuff. So I think, a lot of people could benefit from custom geometry. Do they necessarily need it? Up for debate. Probably not.
How much were your shoes?
The ones that I'm currently wearing, 60 quid.
Really? I thought they were more expensive than that.
Sport Pursuit, mate.
I was like, you're going to say like 300 quid or something. But let's say...
You can take the man out of Yorkshire.
let's just
Yorkshire out of the man.
Let's just hypothesize that they were really expensive, but you've been wearing them for a year every single day. Well, so let's say they were 350 quid. Well, that's how much is that per day? And then suddenly the value of it becomes
and it's about that perception of value. But we've got to be practical about it as well.
Yeah.
Like not everyone can afford a custom made bike. So, in our business, fitters, it is literally like we've been saying, here are the choices that you can make.
Yeah.
We're making informed decisions. Now, obviously, as a custom frame builder, this is slightly, a slightly different angle on it. But, it's a discussion.
Well, that's why we do standard sizes as well.
Yeah,
and that's the thing. It's like you get, the full custom process is long and drawn out. And like you just described, you have to take your time over it. You have to measure twice, cut once. You can't just bang it out as quickly as possible. So it's also good, 90% of people can do with a standard size, off-the-shelf size. So why not just make a whole batch of those, you sell more bikes. But
yeah, and I think just with the number of adjustments that you can make through all the components, like you're probably getting 90% of the way there, and people will be, very, very happy with that. And so, where when do people kind of really want to get that kind of custom bike? Maybe it's after they've spent a good amount of time on a well customized like kind of stock geometry bike.
What is interesting is exactly what you say. You would think that your demographic of full custom customers are going to be people that have been riding for years, have ridden several bikes, never really found one that really suited them, fit them properly. And then they're like, okay, now it's time I'm retired. I've got all this money. It's time for a custom bike. But it's surprising, like you get quite a few people who are not that experienced and they dive straight in to the custom thing. And a few times. And that always surprises me because I'm like, maybe you should just try off the shelf first. Like, maybe it'll you'll save a lot of money and time. But that's not to say that we would turn somebody down if they were but okay, so your attitude as fitters is good in the sense, or to me it's good, in the sense that somebody will come to you, you'll sit on the bike and then you will consider their lifestyle, their budget, all the constraints and everything else and say, look, it's, a custom bike might be ideal for you, but let's look at the budget and look at, that's something that people need to talk about from the get-go.
There usually are stock bikes that you can make work,
Yeah.
It's but it just depends on the individual, obviously. I think it's just, it's a really, it is a luxury. I think there was it came from, like, same with bike fitting, how, there was the legacy of parts and components, ridiculously long cranks and, massive standover heights and things like that. There was a time when all bikes were custom, right? You go to a bike shop and they would measure you up and they would make you a custom frame, like lugged, brazed, silver soldered, whatever. So now it's become, instead of a necessity, it is a luxury. And that's something to think, because there are still people, there's older people who, remember the good old days, and custom is what they, that's when I buy a bike, it's like they've only ever gone to a suit tailor to get there. Or maybe there are not that many of those people left. there's certainly there's always a resurgence of these trends. You could call them fads, trends, fads, whatever you want to call them. It's true, but some are long, some go on for longer than others. And you can also get fairly cheap custom bikes as well, depending on the material. You can get really nice steel bikes. I think steel frames for, it's still a lot of money, but like £2,000 for a frame, I think is not crazy.
That's around.
Yeah.
But and there's always going to be the kind of outliers within the kind of demographics and physiology and all that. Like, we've got a mountain bike coming in for a guy who's like 6'7" or something like that.
Really?
Yeah, and the only way we could get him to pedal well on a mountain bike was to go custom geometry. So he's such a big guy that he's just going to destroy everything else. Sichubang was way too steep, things like that. So that'll be a really interesting kind of project to see in the flesh when it actually finally comes back. It's as you said, Lee, it's just it's really amazing when those bikes come back and people ride them and they're like, wow, this feels amazing.
Especially if they've never had anything that's fit right, but also cause them issues, And it's kind of like,
I think those people almost self-select because they end up, everything that they ride is uncomfortable issues, or like kind of smaller riders as well, like kind of shorter riders are just really not very well catered for within the kind of bike industry. Like wheel sizes are just all the same size, and crank lengths are like kind of there's very minimal difference.
There's a lot more because there's so many more women cycling now. On average, you've got smaller people. Not that there aren't small men, but so there are a lot more people coming to us looking for the extra smalls and the double XS and things like that, and then you having to adjust the geometry, and suddenly having to fit within these boundaries, and you're realizing that the wheels are too big.
Yeah.
You need smaller wheels. Right.
We also actually haven't mentioned that with stock bikes, obviously they're all designed around like a 54. So with those angles, and then obviously you have extra smalls and then extra larges that have essentially the same angles, so they ride awfully. So that's actually another point we should say. Like, so smaller people and really taller people are probably prerequisite of being custom bike.
Just
because they just feel
catered
they feel rubbish. Yeah.
Well, like what I was saying with the smaller wheels thing, it's like, you get to a certain size, when you get small enough, suddenly 700C is too big. You can't, because if you don't want masses of toe overlap, you have to slacken it out on the front so much that it compromises the handling of the bike. So you can go down a wheel size. Of course, you can go down a wheel size, but you won't find the tyres that your friends are riding because they don't make them, So it's just changing a little bit. And again, for the big people, it's finding those angles where you don't know how, and this is why it's so important for the fitters to be really tightly involved with the manufacturers, with the frame builders, is because you can see a drawing of a bike, right? We all know what a bike looks like. You draw one in the CAD program and you look at it and you kind of go, that looks weird. This looks weird. The head tube's too long, the top tube's too short. But then you put that person on the bike, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, the bike does not ride itself. It's actually got a body on top of it.
Yeah.
And that's really important to always maintain that relationship between the rider and the bike. And it's not just that. Too many people just look at bikes sitting there on their own.
Yeah. The bike is a tool to do a job,
Yeah.
essentially. And a lot of people forget that.
Yeah.
It is not an object.
It's so easy to forget, though, isn't it? When you're just sitting in your living room staring at your bike and going, oh, that slam stem looks so sick. I can't ride it.
This is where you and I differ. I'm a practical man.
Matt sits there and looks at his cables and go, oh, look at that practicality.
If that breaks, I can fix it in less than 5 minutes.
I do love that about cables. It's just, I want to see it work. I want them on the outside.
Oh my God, we're going to be talking about rim brakes soon, aren't we?
Oh, you better
We're
believe
sound
it.
really old, aren't we?
Yeah. Enough about butts.
Next episode.
Rim
brakes.
Where have we got to? Have we?
I think that's good. Let's
42 minutes. What a load of nonsense.